Welcome to the Future of Payroll and Workforce Management Insights by HR.com, your go-to resource for insights into payroll and workforce management. From navigating compliance and technology trends to exploring the latest in global payroll solutions, we're here to keep you ahead of the curve. Join us as we dive into the forces reshaping payroll and share practical strategies to optimize your workforce management. Let's get started. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Future of Payroll and Workforce Management, a podcast here at HR.com, where I am Executive Community Leader of Future of Payroll, and I do a few other things. But enough about me. My guest today is Chris Radvansky. Hello, Chris.
Hey, Brent. How's it going today, man?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thank you very much. Where are you based out of again?
Well, I'm based outside of Philadelphia, where my Philadelphia Phillies are number one team in the NL. So we'll see how that plays out in October.
As a New England sports fan, I will keep my lips sealed at the moment. But in any event, no, good luck to you guys. We have a really interesting topic today. It's around the contingent workforce. But as I like to, with every one of my guests, we like to ask this question because I think it gets at some interesting stuff. What galvanizes you in the world of work? What gets you up in the morning? What's your passion when it comes to the world of work, Chris?
Brent, I think these days you have to tie everything to value, and you should be passionate about where you can drive value. And for me, my value, I've always been a numbers guy, a math guy. I got my CPA back in the day. I was just data. I love it. And the more I've worked within HR, the more I've pushed into people analytics and analyzing trends in talent acquisitions, macroeconomic factors. And I know within the HR space, so many people are passionate about connecting people, right? About making sure this is a perfect fit. And yeah, it might not be the most automated process, but Pete and Sally, we were able to match them together and they're working along great. And it's going fantastic. I'm like, that's terrific. That's not what galvanizes me. That's not what I'm passionate about. I love having the data of those Pete's and those Sallys aggregated hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of times. And then saying, all right, once we found out this trend, once we saw this was a categorization that we didn't expect, and we can make a different decision based upon that, that has a material impact on a business. And I think that folks within HR, they shy away a little bit more from the data as, of course, finance, data, accounting, data, HR, not as much, but I think that there's more and more of a focus being pushed onto the people analytics. And that's where I love educating folks. I love making their days easier. I love giving them the insights that they right now just don't have the time and the resources and the bandwidth, all pretty much the same word, to do themselves. So that's what gets me going.
Yeah. That analysis of what's going on after you have those hundreds or even thousands sometimes of individual interactions, and looking at those analytics, that data, and figuring out, okay, what's the course correction? What should we be doing differently? How can we be better? That's an interesting area of HCM that's not necessarily where most HCM people's interests reside. And so it's important to have folks like you out there looking at that, looking under the hood and this sort of stuff. Chris, maybe you could share a little bit about your background for our audience, because I think it's really pertinent to our topic today.
Yeah, so I started Rad Consultants about 2 years ago. I'm Coach Rad out on the basketball court and soccer field. My dad was Coach Rad, or Mr. Rad as well, teaching math in high school. So again, kind of in the blood. So I dove in, Rad Consultants, absolutely. And what we're doing is we're helping companies within largely the contingent labor space to make better decisions based upon their data. So within contingent workforce, there is a managed services provider, which kind of connects all these different staffing suppliers together to the end client. There's a VMS, a vendor management system, that is really the transaction system, right? We need to open a requisition. We need the job description, the job title. How much are they going to be paid? Where are we going to fill them? Which suppliers are going to be able to submit resumes? So that whole talent acquisition process needs to be captured somewhere so that it can be structured and streamlined and all that lovely stuff that we talk about nowadays. And that's again within the VMS. And then you have staffing suppliers that are responsible for engaging and providing the individual candidates. A lot of that information is data. It's all data, right? We want to capture that as much as possible. I would say one flaw within the industry is that we don't capture that as much as possible. We don't log interviews. We don't do feedback, completion requests on resume submittals. Yeah, we didn't like that person. Well, why didn't you like that person? We need to make sure all that can be documented. So the reason that I've jumped in with Rad Consultants and doing this is because I spent 11 years with a larger company that had both an MSP and a VMS. I served companies such as McKinsey, Goldman Sachs, KPMG, working with a number of different MSPs right now. I'm working with a very large hospitality global company. And just again, bringing those insights that exist within their operations that they just do not have the time to find themselves, and automating that and being a really good consultant in the meantime.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And your background is in doing this for large companies that tend to have, sort of a framework or a team that can kind of support this, right? Whereas a lot of mid-sized companies and maybe larger on the verge of being mid-sized companies, but still technically small companies, they don't have those kinds of teams, but they still have this need around contingent workers, around the contingent workforce. And maybe you could, if you could, for our audience, just for those out there that might be, because we had a discussion around this in the green room the other day around, there are a lot of HR and HCM folks that don't necessarily know what a contingent worker is.
Right, right. So contingent worker, when I first started in this industry back in 2012, I got heard a opening, hey, we have a role within a company called in the contingent workforce space. And I'm like, well, that's not a thing. That's made up. That's not a real industry. But of course, as you jump in, you say, wow, yeah, this is a niche, but there's a lot of players within this niche. So why does it exist? Back in the day, back in the early 90s, Microsoft ran into some compliance issues when it comes to their contractors and who was eligible for stock options. And once those contractors by Microsoft were deemed not eligible, then they say, wait a second, let's talk to the Bureau of the Department of Labor and determine why we're not eligible. And sure enough, it was found that they are eligible. So that all comes down to compliance. And when you talk to a company, yeah, they want to maximize profits, but I think more than that, they want to make sure that they're in compliance. As unsexy as it is, they need to make sure that they're playing by the rules. Otherwise, they take a massive reputation hit. And then, of course, that does have financial implications, both from a compliance, punitive damages, court fines and things like that nature. And then, hey, listen, I don't want to work for that company. They don't treat their contingent workers, their temp workers, their contractors, whatever term you want to throw on it. They don't treat those folks very well. I, as a contingent worker, I'm looking to have something that's going to challenge me, that's going to change it up every 9 months, maybe every 18 months. I'm an IT contractor. I love learning this. I love applying it on a project, taking 3 months off, learning the next new skill. Of course, right now, that would be AI, right? We've got to throw AI. This is a podcast. There's the rules. So that's the attractiveness for a worker. And then, of course, the attractiveness for the employer is that compliance that we talked about, flexibility, understanding the new skills that are out there, and then kind of a just-in-time workforce, especially for something that might be a little bit seasonal. So that's a little bit of the background.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You mentioned AI, and I've gotten to the point where AI coming out of left field in a podcast no longer phases me. I got my glove out already to catch it. So I figured we'd talk about AI a little bit today. And by the way, compliance. If you look closely enough, compliance actually can be sexy. I just want to mention that also. Um, let's talk a little bit about. We always bring a little bit of the humor here in Future of Work and
Absolutely.
Workforce Management podcast. How are companies today? Well, actually, before we ask that, I have a question around compliance, incidentally. Um, it's, there's a so that Microsoft case that you mentioned, which is kind of I think it's a little bit of a benchmark. I'm learning a little bit here. Um, there have been some sort of outgrowths or outcomes from that where companies are much more careful and diligent and specific around who their contingent workers are versus their W-2 full-time employees are. Can you just talk a little bit from a high level, it doesn't have to be super granular, about what companies are doing to make sure that they have crossed their T's and dotted their I's at the outset so they don't stumble into this kind of a situation?
Yeah, I've already mentioned two acronyms, and we know every industry is just full of acronyms. So if you remember anything, it's MSP and VMS.
Yeah.
But then there's another one called EOR, that is employer of record. I'm not sure if that one is outside of the contingent workforce industry, but essentially, if you are an end client, let's say, I'm throwing an insurance company out there, you're an insurance company, and you've had somebody within IT, they've been a good senior project manager for 25, 30 years. That person retired, right? However, they say, you know what? I don't want to be fully retired. I want to work 15 hours a week. And we say, okay, well, we're going to have you do that. But of course, we don't want to hire you as a full time employee because that doesn't make sense. So we are going to have you go with our payroll provider, or what could be called an EOR, an employer of record. So that individual there's no blurred line between, wait a second, are they a full-time employee of me, insurance company? Are they a full-time employee of the EOR? The answer is they're an employee of the EOR. Again, full-time, part-time, whatever you want to call it. However, there is no gray area there. You, on paper, according to the government, according to the company, that person is not one of my employees, and therefore they're going to be treated in X manner. If they were my employee, they would be treated in Y manner. And that demarcation is really what established from that court case from Microsoft. So yes, the contingent workforce industry, which has multiple conferences a year across the country, across the world, has this whole scenario set up largely for compliance. And then once we check that compliance, checkbox, then folks say, okay, what other value can we drive, right? Then we start saying, okay, how many staffing suppliers do we have? How many contractors do we actually have? We have no idea. There's folks that just get, hey, we need somebody. I used to golf with somebody. I used to work with that person. That person sent me an email. And sure, I'm going to bring in one of their contingent workers to work for me. I send a PO to purchasing, and it gets paid. And that can happen hundreds of times within your company, right? And then you say, well, wait a second, that one got paid $100 an hour. This one got paid $60 an hour. They're doing the same thing. They're essentially sitting next to each other. Why is there a $40
Yeah.
gap there, right? And so that lack of visibility, all of a sudden, on this operation that started for compliance, folks just start asking very natural questions. And that says, okay, well, why don't we capture that and capture that and capture that and bring that all together? And now that person and those people are going to get a pay rate of $75. Instead of having 600 or 60 suppliers have with one candidate each or with one worker each, we're going to have 20 suppliers. Each of them, we're going to have more volume. They're going to be thrilled about it. Yes, they're going to have to play a little bit more ball when it comes to compliance, when it comes to cost. However, because of the volume, they're willing to make that, quote, sacrifice. So a lot in play here. Nothing exists in a silo. And then you look at all that. Well, that's just contingent workforce. And then you say, wait a second, do we want to transfer that contingent worker over to full time? And if so, why? And then it gets into, well, what's the job title? What are they going to get paid? What rules exist around my pay rates for contingent workers and full time? So again, so many layers to unravel here.
And from the talent acquisition side, as it sort of parlays with or overlaps with workforce management too, I know that companies, or a lot of companies, depending on where they're operating or with whom they do business, they're required compliance wise to put up a job description and entertain other folks through interviews, even just to go through the motions to show that they did, even if they know they want this particular contingent worker to bring that person on W-2 for whatever reason. So there's all sorts of things to bear in mind. This might actually be a great segue. One of the questions we were discussing and agreeing with Chris is why do you you, Chris, feel the contingent workforce is essential. Why is the contingent workforce essential?
I think that there's such a focus, I mentioned earlier, on values, on flexibility, on agility, on just-in-time skills. I think there's something called a skills-based organization now where who can do the one thing that I need to have done.
Mhm.
And I think to have access to that level of agility is very attractive. I see myself as being a part of that. As a one-man band here, I'm able to deliver the one thing that these folks don't want to hire a full-time employee for. They don't need me full-time. So if I can serve multiple different masters with the one thing that I'm damn good at, then that's probably a perfect marriage, both for me on doing the thing that I really enjoy and also for the companies that engage with me because, yeah, they need to check that box. They want to check it very, very well. They don't have the bandwidth or the skills in-house to do it on a regular basis. And therefore, yeah, let's look externally. Let's look for an external worker that can do that for us. And you can see that happening over and over and over. And again, that's why the industry exists. It's for that agility. A lot of people think, well, this person's going out on maternity leave, or we have a lot of holiday workers that we need to bring on board in November and December. And that might be the case. That's one use case. There's a lot of clinical activity when you want travel nurses and you say, okay, we have a surge in XYZ location. Who can we engage with to bring these workers in? We don't need them for the next 3 years. We need them for the next 3 months or 6 months. So again, having that access to that agility to make it work for you, as long as you have a strategic partner that says, listen, this is going to work for you. We can make this work for a little bit. It's going to cost you X, but we're going to manage it down over time. That's where you need to have those specialists. And that's what contingent workforce can help you achieve.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's agility, workforce agility is a big, I mean, that's the crux of it, really. And there's that workforce agility term has really entered the sort of the consciousness, I think, in this particular industry and profession, which is really interesting. Obviously, there are compliance, not to get back to compliance too much, but just as a to mention, there are compliance considerations when you're an organization and maybe where you can't just use contingent workers. At some point, you have to, it's you get the attention of regulators, and there are laws around this. At some point, somebody has to be is considered a W-2 employee versus contingent, or needs to become a W-2 as opposed to being contingent any longer. So there's all sorts of considerations around that. But you're absolutely correct. There's also an efficiency. There's a real efficiency to it introduces efficiency to the agility imperative, if you will,
Yeah.
right? Which is
Yeah.
really, really interesting. Yeah, yeah. So, another question that we have here is what are the ways in which companies are achieving these goals? There's a lot to talk about here, scopes of work, automation, AI. Maybe we could talk about automation and AI, and maybe a little bit around the dance between contingent employees and maybe agentic AI even.
Yeah. I mean, it's really interesting what's happened over the last couple of weeks. I was thinking traditionally, how does a company, how do they get their things done? A lot of times hiring managers like, I don't care how it gets done. I said to my boss in January that, listen, by the end of this year, I will check that box. That thing, that task, that objective, that initiative, that will be done by December. How it gets done, again, they don't care. It can be done by a full-time employee. It can be done by a contingent worker. It could be billing time and materials, kind of like, okay, I worked 40 hours, 30 hours, whatever it might be. It could be done by an SOW, statement of work, which is I'm going to offload the responsibility of getting that project done, or at least a part of that project done. I'm going to offload that to a company. I don't care how many hours it takes them. They told me it would cost $3 million and it would take 9 months. Boom, I'll do that. So that's three ways. Those are largely people driven. Then you have automation, which is software, workflows, whatever it might be within that. And then now, of course, since November of 2022, when ChatGPT hit the market, generative AI came big. And then now we have agentic AI, right? Where companies are building agents. They're having systems of record for all the agents that they have. For
Yeah.
instance, with Workday releasing that. So those are really the five ways: it's full-time employee, contingent worker, SOW, automation, and then AI. And really what's happening is things are moving from left to right on that curve. And they're saying, how can we not open a full-time employee request? How can we get this done with automation, with agentic AI? And so that question is being asked by Shopify, by Fiverr, by Duolingo. If you look up some of these companies and what their CEOs are saying about how they're going to get these things done within their company, they're like, whatever is the least expensive. And most of the time, that answer is not by hiring a full-time employee. Contingent worker could be there, but the first swing is going to be, let's automate, let's see what we can do with AI.
Absolutely right. I'm so glad you kind of underscored that the whole contingency worker, um, the allure or the attraction of the to the contingent worker is this, again, this efficiency. There's it because there's some efficiency and some cost, um, lower costs associated with the workforce agility, right? And so if those factors are if those rationales are already there, right, then it only makes sense that companies might look at AI agents as well,
Yep.
with the same sort of rationale, the same mindset. It's very, very interesting. Where do you, in the couple of minutes that we have left, Chris, if you have any sort of parting thoughts or maybe sort of a vision of the future of where you think the contingent workforce is going, and what it will be like for organizations to manage contingent workers and maybe some of this agentic AI too.
Yeah, I think that entrepreneurship is going to be on the rise. I believe that some of those the facts I've seen, individual LLCs growing year over year for the last 3 years. Now that might have something to do with COVID, but I think it has a lot to do with the fact that companies are looking to reduce their labor costs, and therefore, of course, that means we're not going to hire anymore, or maybe we'll have some layoffs. And of course, everybody has seen one too many layoffs stories in the news in the last 2 years, right? So if that's the case, and you have a lot more
Yeah.
entrepreneurs out there trying to say, hey, listen, this is what I do, this is what I'm good at. Again, look at myself in the mirror. Then you're going to need to make sure that as a company, you have a structured process in which to engage with that type of talent. And that is what a contingent workforce program can help you enable, whether you're a small company or a large company. Historically, those larger MSPs, those larger VMSs, yes, they want to get those big splashes with those huge multinationals. But now, as companies get to be more mid-sized, the industry itself gets a little bit more seasoned and veteran. Now we can start scaling those processes that worked for enormous companies and mid-sized companies to smaller companies. And so for myself, I'd rather not hire another full-time employee. However, if I can engage with somebody on a short-time basis or on a just 2 hours a week type of a basis for a skill that I have no interest in learning myself, then yeah, I could look to contingent workforce, relatively in the near future here. So I think the possibilities are there. The flexibility is there. I think compliance is really important. But as long as companies are out there and specializing in that one single thing that differentiates them, that drives value, that is a need, and that is in agreement with the regulations in the land, then we have a pretty streamlined process.
Yeah, yeah. It's really interesting, exciting to see where this particular sort of this dynamic within HCM is going. We've heard about the gig workforce, the another term for contingent workforce for a long time. It's really evolving, and companies are really getting better at sort of managing this ecosystem. Uh, Chris, thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast. It's been a real pleasure.
You got it, Brent. Now listen, data. It all comes back to data, right, my friend? All
Yes,
right. So whatever's changing, say where were we? Where do we want to go and how do we get there? But that all starts with having a good picture on where all your data resides and what you want to do with it, what your goals are.
it's a fundamental pillar of it. You're absolutely correct. Thank you, Chris.
You got it, Brent. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Future of Workforce Management and Payroll Insights by HR.com. We hope today's episode brought you valuable insights and fresh perspectives on the future of payroll and workforce management. Be sure to check out more episodes and explore resources at hr.com/podcast or wherever you listen to podcasts. Until next time, keep innovating and making a difference in the world of payroll and workforce management.